So I'm between you and a break. Is that understand? Well, I'll try to make it kind of short. Well, first of all, good morning, and thank you all for coming to this important event. Mr. Tom Fitzpatrick, thank you and your great team for all the hard work in putting this conference together. It really is a privilege to speak in front of you and so many of your leaders and friends from the government, industry, and the private sector. However, I'd really like to give a big round of applause for a philanthropist, environmentalist, and founder of the Cynthia and George Mitchell Foundation, an all-around great person, Mr. George Mitchell. Please join me in doing that. I know he's not here right now, but I believe his son Todd may be in the room. Todd, are you here? Great. Thank you for being here. Like I said, it's such an honor to be here this morning to share insights on some of our actions in the Army and specifically Fort Bliss and into one of the most important issues facing our country today, at least we believe, and that's energy efficiency. Indeed, the issues we're discussing here have local, regional, national, even global implications in many ways. Energy efficiency, as you know, is no longer simply a social issue. It is no longer an issue of quality of life. It's an issue of national security and, in some ways, our national economy. The importance of the energy issue is demonstrated by the diversity in this room today. Resolving this issue requires leaders across all facets of the government, the military, science, education, and the private sector, really to work together and to collaborate. And that's something we've done in the El Paso, Fort Bliss area. And as I talk about El Paso, in fact, I talked to someone earlier today, and said, well, where is El Paso? I said, well, El Paso is as far west as you can go in Texas. And we have actually a unique opportunity right now in El Paso and Fort Bliss, because I'm the commanding general of Fort Bliss in the 1st Army Division, but I'm also a native of El Paso. And that is so rare to be stationed anywhere near your hometown. And El Paso, many people don't know, El Paso is really the 4th largest city in Texas, behind Houston, San Antonio, and Dallas. We have between 700 and 800,000 people in El Paso. And right across the river, or I guess this time of year, the creek, or the Rio Grande, is about 1.2 million people. So in the area, in that area, there's about 2 million people. We're very passionate at Fort Bliss, Texas, about energy solutions and about reducing our carbon footprint. Many people in the renewable energy movement are surprised that the Army is so involved in this issue, but they should not be. The Army has a bigger and more immediate stake in addressing energy as a national and global security concern at both the tactical and strategic level. My good friend Dan Nolan, who I don't think is here today, but he's a retired Army colonel, and he's a principal founder of Greenhawks, which is a nonprofit organization that pushes for defensible renewable energy platforms within the Department of Defense. Now, as he put it, climate change is no longer the purview of Birkenstock-wearing tree huggers. Okay. Now, when I quote Colonel Nolan, I mean no offense to any self-proclaimed tree huggers in the audience today. I consider myself a tree hugger and an environmentalist. In fact, we're planting 20,000 trees on Fort Bliss as we look to become an oasis in the desert, there in the Chihuahuan Desert overall. I want to tell you that the military, for the most part, gets it. We understand the folly of continuing our addiction to fossil fuels and the resulting effect it has on our operations, on our planning, on everything we do. And leaders such as myself, Dan Nolan, and so many others have had moments of realization over the past decade, and we call these aha moments. In fact, let me get behind this podium here real quick. Can you hear me now? One of those aha moments for me was when, I think I've got feedback. One of those aha moments for me was when I was the commanding general of Fort Irwin, California. And this was in 2007. It was about a month after taking over. And we got a call from our electrical utility provider, Southern Cal Edison. They said, hey, we're going to be cutting off your electricity for a while because we have to do some work, whatever. So, sure, no big deal. Well, they cut it off, and it was only supposed to be for a couple hours. It was actually over 14 hours that it was cut off. And at the time, we thought that there were alternate means that, we'll just go to the alternate way of getting our electricity. Well, we had one 18-mile line that went to Fort Irwin, California. And we just learned a lot from that. What we learned was, if Southern Cal Edison can cut that off, what about a well-planned, well-organized, and well-financed terrorist operation? What could that do to us? and that for us was a force protection issue. Energy and sustainability as a part of force protection. So that was my early aha moment. So immediately began at Fort Irwin working on our energy security. And we were making some progress before I departed in 2009. But I always thought if I'd started from day one, what a difference that would have made. When I took over Fort Bliss, Texas, and 1st Army Division in July 2010, it was determined that we were going to figure this out from day one. So when I took command, I got our staff together and everybody together and said, okay, show me what we're doing as far as renewable energy. I said, oh, sir, well, we're kind of leading the Army. And we actually were at the time. They showed me a 50 kilowatt project and then a 200 kilowatt project. That's why I'm impressed when I heard earlier today all these tens of thousands of megawatts throughout Texas. And I kind of scratched my head and said, you know, we're just thinking in kilowatts right now. We've got to be thinking in megawatts. And eventually, we've got to be thinking in gigawatts. And Fort Bliss has some natural resources. Fort Bliss itself is the largest training area in our Army of 1.2 million acres. If you add Fort Bliss to our sister installation, White Sands Missile Range in New Mexico, that's 25% of all the Army's landmass, all together in one place. But our challenge was that Fort Bliss, which was a big winner of the BRAC 2005 legislation that came out, is that at that time in 2005, we were the 21st largest Army post in the country, about 8,000 some odd soldiers. Well, in a short period of time, we experienced the largest growth of any Army installation since World War II in over 65 years. And now we are the 4th largest. We have about 30,000 soldiers. And if you add our soldiers, family members, and civilians, it's about 90,000 folks there at Fort Bliss, Texas. A huge challenge as far as energy. And we hadn't really thought that through. So what was going to happen? Well, we were just going to pay more and more for our energy. So what we came up with was a comprehensive environmental campaign plan. And by the way, prior to coming to Fort Bliss, I read and read some more and read as much as I could. I mean, again, I'm awed by the expertise in this room. Again, I'm just a soldier, but a soldier who is concerned, just like the rest of the Army is concerned. And this is kind of maybe my night job. My day job is deploying our units. We just had a brigade of 4,000 return from Afghanistan. We have another brigade that's leaving in a month and a half to Afghanistan. Our Combat Aviation Brigade is going to Afghanistan. We have advisors there from another brigade in Afghanistan. And we ourselves, I guess the New York Times just broke the story this morning, we'll be taking our division headquarters to Jordan in the Middle East next month for an exercise, depending on what happens there with that very volatile area. So that's my day job. What we were concerned about, though, again, was our energy security overall. So with our environmental campaign plan, what we worked out was a comprehensive plan for self-sustainment. And this had not been done before in our Army. So immediately, of course, when you try to do something new, you have naysayers everywhere, at all levels. Not only at Fort Bliss, El Paso, but all the way between us, the Army, and the Department of Defense. What also occurred, though, in July 2010 was we got a new Assistant Secretary of the Army, Ms. Catherine Hammock. She's Assistant Secretary of the Army for Installations, Energy, and the Environment. And she was an ally. And I knew, after meeting her, that ultimately, when it got to her desk, and she was our civilian in charge of all of that, that we had a friend in court. But we came up with, by the end of 2015, we would be self-sustaining as far as renewable energy, net zero as far as energy. Now, I know there's a lot of definitions of net zero out there, but our definition was we would produce more than we would consume in renewable energy. It would seem pretty simple, but immediately people said, you just can't do that, you can't. And in many ways, they were correct with a lot of the complexity, the regulations, and everything else that was going on. But I'll get to that in a minute. But as we worked on this comprehensive environmental campaign plan, we also thought of other things as far as our master plan for Fort Bliss itself, where we encouraged not only being great environmental stewards, but also resiliency for our soldiers and families. So we went kind of a dual track in moving forward with our master plan for the installation, again, which hadn't been done before, with supporting our environment as well as resiliency. Because some of the same things we saw were in common, such as having bike paths, walking paths, gathering areas. One thing about our new barracks, they're great, but they isolate our soldiers. In the old days, you might have a bunch of soldiers in a single room. We have single soldiers in a single room. It's like an apartment. But you miss that contact. So we wanted people to get out. So bike paths, walking paths, gathering areas. I mentioned the trees. Well, we had a goal of planting 10,000 trees in 10 years. I'm sorry, 10,000 trees in 2 years. But we exceeded that goal. That's why we made it 20,000 trees. Right now we're at 12,465 trees and counting. You can go on our website and see our numbers as we're counting the trees. Again, not just to turn Fort Bliss from a desert to an oasis, but also getting smart on where we're putting the trees. Putting the trees in strategic locations near buildings, especially houses, can reduce the temperature, as you know, with the shade, somewhere between 5 and 12 degrees, depending where that is. That also would save us energy over time. Also looking at mass transit, which wasn't a big deal at Fort Bliss. We wanted to encourage people to use mass transportation. We worked closely with the city of El Paso on moving their clean air, natural gas bus lines onto our installation both on West Bliss and Far East Bliss. And we've finally done that. And we know that's going to reduce the number of cars that our soldiers will bring on our installation overall. Same thing with HOV lanes. I mean, little things like that. HOV lanes and coming into our installation where I looked one morning and almost every single car coming into our installation just had one person in it. It's like, we've got to do something about that. So we're moving to having a fast-track way of coming on our installation by doing that. But our overall arching goal still with our environmental campaign plan is something we're calling net zero as an Army. And net zero is really divided into 3 different areas. One is net zero for energy, and that's again where we'll be self-sufficient or self-sustaining. Next is net zero with water and net zero with waste. I'll take each of those really, really quick. For net zero with energy, we've moved out in trying to take advantage of our wind, our solar, our geothermal capability, which we know we have, because up at White Sands, we think it's about 220 degrees at White Sands. Down at Fort Bliss, it may be 180, but we will see. We're building a new $1 billion hospital on our installation. And part of that is they're going to be drilling a hole about 6,000 feet in the ground, which we've never done before. We've done 3,000 feet. And our hope is that maybe we'll find that 220 degree temperature, but at least 180 to at least get started with the geothermal. And again, I know we have expertise in there. We probably can question some of that. But that's where we're moving out in that area also. But we're building right now a 1.4 megawatt solar array outside of our headquarters, outside of our post and installation headquarters. You may say, 1.4 megawatts, that's not much. That's actually the largest solar array in the Army. How about that? But we're just getting started. Next month, we'll be announcing, either next month or as late as December, announcing a deal between the Army and El Paso Electric. And I want to thank Mr. Tom Shockley, the new president of El Paso Electric, for working with us. Because we've been working on Paso Electric for quite a while now, for at least 18 months. And that's where an advantage, I guess, is my hometown, is being 1 to 2 degrees separation from really everybody and saying, you've got to help us out with this. And they showed us the profit, that it's not profitable. And then we showed other ways that, yes, we can make this business case. Because we had to convince both the Department of Defense as well as El Paso Electric that you can make a business case for that. And we have. So we'll be announcing a 20 megawatt solar array that will be built on East Bliss in the next 2 months, at least the announcement in the next 2 months. Now it'll be built and operational by the end of 2015, followed very closely by another 20 megawatt solar array, which will also be on Fort Bliss. And as you see, we're adding up the megawatts because our goal is 70 megawatts. Our goal right now is 70 megawatts because that will make sure that in our peak usage that we have it covered. We also have some smaller wind projects that will help us too, a couple megawatts here, a couple megawatts there. We're also working on from the bottom up, and that is educating our population on energy conservation. And we're working that hard. So between 2013 and 2018, that 5-year period, our plan is to reduce our energy consumption by 3 to 5% a year. And we know we can get there. We started with metering all buildings. We haven't metered all buildings yet, but we will have all of our buildings metered by 2014. But we have started with our residential homes. We have over 5,000 homes on Fort Bliss. We started with mock billing, which scared everybody. Because no one on the military installation is used to being billed for your energy. You just use as much energy as you could. That's the problem. So it's educating our population. So with the mock billing, and everybody was scared about that. I got more complaints and more Facebook comments, more nasty notes on that. But what we ended up doing, and we found out, is 26% of our residential population would receive a bonus or rebate for their usage. 22% would have to pay, and then 52% no change at all. And when we publicized that, people said, okay. We used to get complaints that a neighbor would keep their lights on. And we suggested, don't complain about that anymore. Let them keep their lights on. so their bill can be higher now. But that is going to be effective. That was tried on another military installation, and they reduced their consumption by 20%. Remember, all we're looking for is between 3 and 5%. But we think we might get 20% in the first year of doing this. We're going to start the actual billing this month, fiscal year 13. So we're very, very proud of that. Working and changing habits of some of our businesses on Fort Bliss. Our number one business is our privatized housing partner. Our privatized housing partner is Balfour Beatty, a very good company, billion-dollar company worldwide, builds military houses and all sorts of structures throughout the world. They were pretty resistant when I talked about we've got to build to LEED standards, which to me is easy. They said, okay, we might be able to do maybe silver. They said, no, we're looking at platinum. So it took some time with that, and now they're doing a number of things. They've made, in fact, a 180-degree turn. They are now going to build on our privatized housing and on our rooftop solar arrays about 13.2 megawatts worth, which is, again, will be the largest in the Army. We haven't done that before. But they've just inked the deal on that, so we're moving out with that also. They're also going to help us with our net zero overall plan. We're going to build the largest net zero community in America. 600 homes. We think it's the largest in the world, but maybe someone can find another one. But it's at least the largest one in America. That is a housing area of 600 houses that is completely self-sufficient in energy, water, and waste. And that'll be built right across from our PX commissary complex, which is the largest in the world, on Fort Bliss. So we're very, very proud of that. In talking about water, our challenge with net zero with water was that El Paso was ahead of us with using purple pipes. Our parade grounds and our ball fields were all being watered with potable water. When I found out about that, I thought, that's a criminal act. You can't do that. But we couldn't figure out how to do it otherwise. So what we're working on now is a purple pipe system with the city of El Paso, working with our water utility company, to use gray water to water our ball fields. And I know that there are some issues with that long term, but we're still working through that too. And then what do you do with black water? So we're becoming big water conservationists on Fort Bliss. And then for waste. Prior to taking over in July 2010, we weren't recycling at all on Fort Bliss, just barely in large bins. But our residential areas, we weren't doing that. So again, talking to our housing partners, Balfour Beatty, we started recycling. And it's caught on our installation. We've now also bought these tandem, I don't know if you have a picture, there it is, of a trash can and a recycling bin, which I know should be blue, but it's green. We bought 1,500 of these. And anywhere you go on Fort Bliss, when you go to one of those, recycle guy, when you go to one of those, you can see another one. So there is no excuse for not picking up either trash or something recyclable and putting it in. And what we've done is we've added incentives to that. In the past, I don't even know where our recycled dollars went. I think it went to helping the recycle staff with furniture, their office space, hiring new people. They finally said, no, we'll give you enough for your operating costs, but everything else will go to our Morale, Welfare, and Recreation Fund, which supports our soldiers and families with things like building bike paths, skate parks, and things like that. When we tried that in 2011, from recycling dollars, we were able to put $563,000, $500,000 into our MWR fund, unheard of in the Army. So encouraged by that, we said, okay, we'll make it $1 million for 2012. And that's where we had that other one up there showing Recycle Man. But we're now up, it's now, by the end of September, we're up to $850,000. So we'll surpass the $1 million mark on that. So our goal next year, of course, will be more. It'll be $1.5 million. And at some point, we think routinely we'll get $3 million out of recycling for our soldiers and families. We've also given incentives to our units. Units that in their different footprints, if they reduce energy in the top, I think it's the top 5, they will get certain incentives, whether it's money for company and brigade and battalion parties or things like that. So we've got a little competition in there. But also for our waste, the waste to energy, we're looking at a waste to energy project working with the city of El Paso. Now we've got some legal issues that we've got to work out because by law, federal law, we can't bring in waste onto our installations. So we're working some things on that. But that waste energy plant, we think, can be about 40 megawatts of energy and also can solve some political problems in our area. Of course, we're in southern New Mexico, and the big complaint from Governor Susana Martinez, who's the governor of New Mexico, who we went to high school together, believe it or not, back in El Paso, is that El Paso dumps all of our waste on southern New Mexico just by contract. So that's been an issue back and forth. We can use all that waste to be able to turn that into energy for a waste energy project on Fort Bliss. And Fort Bliss is no stranger to these kind of large projects. Some of you may know that at one point in the early 1990s, Fort Bliss was going to die in the vine. They didn't think that Fort Bliss had the water to be able to sustain any kind of growth. But what Fort Bliss did in working with the local community in El Paso and the state of Texas and others, we built the largest desalination plant inland in the world, which is now on Fort Bliss. That's why Fort Bliss was the big winner in 2005 for BRAC, because we've got water for centuries. So we now have the Senator K. Bailey Hutchison desalination plant. Because again, we got a lot of help obviously from Senator K. Bailey Hutchison on that. But again, we're no stranger to big projects like that. Also at Fort Bliss, we have the Brigade Modernization Command, which is testing all of our new equipment that goes to our new units and soldiers in combat. And one thing that we're testing there now is operational energy, renewable energy that we can use in the operational environment. And we've now figured out how we can set up a forward operating base and completely run it by renewable energy. We're testing that out at Fort Bliss. So not only are we doing it overall as an installation, but we're also doing it and looking at our energy, our renewable energy for our units in the field. And our goal now is by December 2018 that we'll be completely self-sufficient in energy, waste, and water overall. Now, originally our goal was 2015. I made that as a stretch goal just to force the bureaucracies of the Army and DOD to get moving, and they have for the most part overall. Now, overall, we have a couple things. Leaders can make a difference. Leaders can make a difference in anything that we do. And one leader in particular I'd like to highlight is Ms. Catherine Hammock. Her leadership in the Army of her installations, energy, and the environment has made such a difference in this net zero movement. Now, she picked Fort Bliss as the installation to move forward because we're already doing those things, but now she's bringing the rest of the Army with her, which is really kind of neat. And if one person like that can just change the Army, I mean, what can you do? What can you do in the areas that you're responsible for and in your organizations? One thing that we'd ask is that we can make a difference right here in Texas. And my experience in California was a little different than in Texas. Now, Texas is #1 in wind, as you know, in our nation. It ranks number 1. By the U.S. State Energy Conservation Office, Texas ranks as number 1 in solar potential. However, Texas ranks around 11th in total solar productivity, even behind the state of New Jersey. New Jersey! And California is number 1 in solar productivity. We need more state incentives for solar energy in Texas. Because Fort Bliss, Texas is right there with New Mexico, and I can tell you a dirty little secret, 89% of Fort Bliss, Texas is actually in New Mexico. So we work a lot with New Mexico. There is a big difference in the incentives for renewable energy between New Mexico and Texas. So we just need more incentives for solar energy in Texas because the sun is already here. And in El Paso, the sun shines about 355 days a year. The technology is developed, the ideas are ongoing. We just need leadership to get things moving. Now, as you probably can tell, I'm an optimist. I believe in human ingenuity. I believe in the people in this room that we can make things happen. I believe that together we can get this done, and it's our responsibility really as temporary guests on this planet to sustain this beautiful place that we call Earth. And at Fort Bliss, Texas, we're just trying to make a difference in our little corner of the Earth. And through this same vision and spirit, we can forge a better, cleaner, and safer world for the future and for our children. And I just think together we can make a difference. So let's continue to collaborate. Keep doing what you're doing. This conference is important. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you.